Hello, everybody. Can you hear me now? I think you probably can because my display is indicating that you can. Well, something is going through now. Thank you very much, OBS Streamlabs. It seems that you decided to change all of the um, settings. Stuart is still saying nothing. Now it's coming through, you see. That's good. It's just a ploy really to get everybody chatting in chat, you see, and it's worked. You missed my fantastic entry. First and foremost, I want to say hello. It's Andy from Twisted Narrative, and we have Ian here as well. Do you want to say a quick hi, Ian?
Hi everyone, nice to
Uh,
meet you all. Well, I know a few of you already, so
For those of you who can't lip read, what I was basically saying is tonight we are going to talk about my favoritist subject in the world, which is me. Ian very kindly volunteered, it was Ian's idea to interview me. Um, I mean, genuinely, I was a bit kind of, oh, you think people might be interested in that? But we're going to do it anyway, and we're going to see what happens. Um, so, but first, before we move on to that, I want to keep the anticipation there for a moment. We're going to talk about games, last night's game, tonight's game, and tomorrow, well, the weekend's games, really. We're going to do a few name checks and the like, and then we'll go into the questioning itself. So, I just want to say a quick hello because you wouldn't have heard me to Stuart, Kyle, Matt, Michael, I think that is everybody that has said hi in chat as well at the moment. So thank you for joining us. If you are in chat and you haven't said hello yet, shout up. So last night's game was Critical Role Icebreakers. We had James, Jack, and Joe, and Michael and Adrian, and it was a really nice role playing sort of sequence, really. It was sort of finishing off a few sort of minor quests, minor tasks that they needed to do, setting things up for the future. Um, and it ended with a big sort of cliffhanger. So I can't wait to see how they react to all of that next time. Tonight, we have got our weekly Friday night game, Collateral Damage. Very much looking forward to this as well. We've got Stuart, we've got Charlotte, we've got Ben, we've got Ryan, we've got Michael and V. 6 players in that. And well, they're up against some Dalkia. It ended on a sort of the start of a climactic battle. There's a Dalkia brute, which is a huge aberration creature, and some Illithids, some mind flayers, and the like. So I can't wait to get into that and see how they deal with that. And then we've got a relatively full day on Saturday. We've got Curse of Strahd, which Ian is in. We've also got Pete, Matt, and Josh playing in that. And it's an interesting one, isn't it, Ian? An
it
interesting one.
certainly is.
We're at the back end of a very dangerous combat, and it's going to be interesting. Um, Realistically, if you carry on with what you were aiming to do last session, you should get through it. But it's the start of a new game, and they everybody will have forgotten sort of 2 weeks on, and someone maybe it wasn't as bad as we thought. Maybe we shouldn't do a strategic retreat. Maybe we can hold out for another one round, and we might be looking at new characters. So it's well, a very interesting start to my Saturday morning there. Um, then, unfortunately, Tomb of Annihilation isn't going to fire tomorrow, but we will be running Critical Role Diplomates at 4 to 7. And we've got Mal, Doug, Nathan, Charlotte, Ben, and Ben in that. And they are dealing with quite a heavy political situation in the capital of the Dwendalian Empire. And the name of their group, the Diplomates, I think is somewhat ironic. So it's going to be interesting how they resolve that. Another very nice role-play heavy group, and I'm looking forward to seeing them all back at the table. And then another game that Ian is in on Saturday night is Call of Cthulhu, and very much looking forward to this. It's an ongoing campaign that has, me and Ian was sort of chatting sort of pre-stream, and it's been very bitty. Some players couldn't make it, so we've done one shots in between, and I'm really keen to sort of dig down back into this and start the campaign properly, because you've only had a little bit of a session, a little bit of a taster. You've done the prologue, but now we're going into the meat of it, and it will be nice to get some traction on that. And I'm always very excited for Call of Cthulhu. And I think I mentioned you was in it, but I haven't mentioned who else. So we've got George and James, as well as Ian, in that game. Then Sunday, 2 games. We have Mythical, and it looks like it might be a sort of level 1 group. We've got Marcus, James, and Andy and Matt that are joining us for that. And a little bit of a spoiler, it's going to be Danger at Diggers Deep, which is kind of the introductory event that me and good Matt across in chat there are putting together as perhaps our very first published work. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And then it is followed up by our weekly Eberron game, 4 to 7, and we've got Jocelyn, Jen, Tony, Rachel, and Christian in that. And it's always a blast, a good way to sort of bring Sunday to a close. So a very exciting weekend for me, full on. We've got a total of 6 games in total, including tonight's game, which is quite a light weekend for me. Sometimes I can do sort of 4 games a day, so 4 on Saturday, 4 on Sunday. So it's a walk, an easy walk for me over the weekend. Hopefully, if it all goes to plan. Anyway, enough of me talking. Let us move across to Ian. Let Ian introduce himself, and then I'll do some more talking. Hopefully, if I can answer the questions he's about to throw in my direction. So, Ian, quick introduction about yourself, really.
Sure. So, yeah, I'm Ian. I've been a part of the Twisted Narrative family, and I call it a family because I definitely feel that's the way it is through the Discord server and the games we play in. Since 2020, when I came back to the hobby, I originally started kind of playing role-playing games. I think my first kind of step into things was, and it's funny, you mentioned them on stream the other day, which was Lone Wolf books, fighting fantasy books, even like the really old Choose Your Own Adventure books. That kind of got me in, and huge fan of Steve Jackson, Ian Livingstone. And coming from Nottingham, you know, the whole Games Workshop tie. I mean, I've told stories before to some of the people about how I lived in Nuttall as a kid in Nottingham, just down the road from Eastwood, which is where Games Workshop started, and we used to go skip diving to go and get free miniatures out of the skips with all the flash on and stuff. So yeah,
it's all miniatures, not quite Games Workshop.
No, Citadel miniatures, exactly. Yeah, back then.
Yes, I know where Games Workshop really started. You see,
yeah,
I am really old.
Yeah, well, really book on to that. Yeah. But yeah, so I play a few of Andy's games. I think I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment. I certainly play in 2 of his tougher games. I think with Curse of Strahd and Call of Cthulhu. So
absolutely. And you're also an expert, probably self-taught expert on Fantasy Grounds Unity as well. You certainly very generously giving me hints and tips all of the time and helping out our players with the neat little programming and stuff.
Yeah, I think the first game I started playing when I joined you was actually a Pathfinder 2e edition game, which then moved into Curse of Strahd because it stopped firing.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I played on a virtual tabletop at all. And that was Fantasy Grounds. And I was like, well, if I'm going to be playing on this, I'm one of those people that just dives in. So I thought, let's dive in and figure out how to use it. And then about 3 months later, I started running it for a group of my friends that had never role played before, and then I needed to make things easier for myself. So I really invested in a lot of extensions. I'm a lazy DM. So yeah, I've gone down that route.
Nothing wrong with that. And I say I appreciate the heads up with all of the tech, because I hadn't started using virtual tabletops till lockdown either, so it was a big learning curve for me. Anyway, I'm sidelining this by asking you more and more questions. You see what
You
I'm
are, you
doing
are.
here? I'm doing
I absolutely do.
yeah.
And I just want to be really very clear that yeah, this was my idea. This isn't some swerve that Andy's trying to pull. I came to him and said, I think it'd be a really good idea if your audience got to know you a little bit better, and let's use this opportunity to do that. You've got a ton of experience. I think it'd be really good for you to talk around that. And if you're up for it, let me ask you a few questions so people can get to know you a bit better. So that's why we're doing this today. This isn't some marketing ploy on Andy's behalf. He really would quite happily do without it if he's honest. But we're gonna go for it. So because I'm interested as well. Right? I've known Andy for a little while now, and I would like to know a bit more about him. So I know he's got a ton of experience from being in and around the industry. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to understand a bit more. So I suppose the first question is: you live in Nottingham now, but this isn't where you grew up, right? So where did you grow up as a kid?
I think the majority of people can still get that twang of accent from me. But to answer the question, really, I'm a Brummie, born and bred. I grew up in Birmingham, and I've still got huge fond memories of it. And in many ways, if I hadn't grew up in Birmingham, I might not be as associated with the industry as it is now. And I say that because it was a big city, but it was one of the cities that had shops. The city centre had shops in those very early days, so you didn't have to go, where I'm going to get this? Do I get it from mail order, or
Mhm.
do I have to get a train, or get my parents to drive me
Mhm.
to a shop? So yeah, originally from Birmingham, and I'm very proud of that. I say I've got huge fond memories of growing up there. Um,
So what area of Birmingham, Andy? Because there's a big Tolkien connection
oh, well,
to
yeah.
Birmingham, right?
I mean, if uh, I find Tolkien's writings a little hard going,
Mhm.
we could maybe come on to that in a while. But I sort of grew up sort of in a place called Hall Green, which if people are familiar with Birmingham, they'll know it. Originally from Kings Heath, born in Selly Oak Hospital. I'm not going to tell you my PIN number though.
Okay. Any
Um,
pets?
yes, lots of pets. But I say it was great growing up there. I was very lucky in the fact that I went to a good secondary school. It was Moseley, and
Yep.
um, it was very good for a number of ways. Educational, it was good because it was a comprehensive school, but it is an ex-grammar school, so it had all of the expertise of the grammar school teachers there. But it was also multicultural, being in Moseley,
Mhm.
and I mean that is especially growing up in going to school in the 70s. It was really really great. You had friends from that were just Brummies, and I like to,
Mhm.
but their origins and their families' origins were wide and broad, and it was a melting pot of different cultures, which was fantastic. So it was very cool growing up in a sort of multicultural sort of environment like that, and I've sort of carried that with me throughout the whole of my life, and
Mhm.
I'm very grateful to sort of that. Um, but I mean, it wasn't. I mean, there was a chemistry teacher there, and perhaps we'll come on to that in a minute. That was a big gamer,
Mhm.
and I didn't realise that till I accidentally bumped into him in the gaming shop, which I
Mhm.
think was initially very awkward for him, not so awkward for me. Um, and this is really sort of early on. In Birmingham, there were three great stores when I was growing up. There was Nostalgia and Comics, which is sort of there today, really.
Mhm.
And it was comics that got me into gaming more
That's what I was going to
than
ask you.
gaming.
Yeah,
So yeah,
which way round, Kevin? Because I know you're a big comic nerd. I'm a big comic nerd. I know DC's your jam. That you like Marvel, but DC tends to be your jam, right?
yeah.
Uh,
Well, I mean, I was into things before the games existed,
mhm.
having that age. So I used to buy British comics as a younger kid, and
Mhm.
I just loved those. And then I discovered a spinner rack in a sort of newsagents of American comics, and then in 1977-ish. 2000 AD came out and it sort of blew my mind. It was absolutely amazing. And it was just another comic off the rack. And I used to sort of collect them all and read them and enjoy them, the British reprints of the American comics as well. Um, but it was in the back of one of the comics, and for the life of me, I can't remember which one. I think it was an American comic, and I think it was definitely talking about Dungeons and Dragons, but
Mhm.
it was kind of referencing um, sort of the Dungeons and Dragons game, and I'd always been into playing games, things like Monopoly and Risk, because those were the games back then. Um, and then it just like this Dungeons and Dragons thing. It's an open-ended game. It literally said a game with no end, and it's like, I mean, I don't understand this at all, but it sounds cool. It's dragon picture and everything else. And I'd already found Nostalgia and Comics and was sort of talking to them. Hey there, Elsa. Thanks for joining us. And I got directed to Dungeons and Starships, which was, well, I think it was certainly the only gaming store in Birmingham at that time. And eventually they moved from the location that I used to travel to, and they went into one of the shopping centres, and then eventually they were brought out by Games Workshop. Um, but it had the very early issues of White Dwarf, very influenced from the original Games Workshop down in London. And it was there that I bumped into my chemistry teacher, and it was, oh, you like this stuff as well, sir. um, and at first, I think he was a little kind of, oh, I don't want people to know that I like this kind of stuff. But as the years moved, because I was quite young then as well, I took chemistry at A level, and he was instrumental in. We used to play Kingmaker
Mhm.
uh, in sort of lunch breaks, and he used to look after the chess club that I was in as well. Um, and we talked about sort of Dungeons and Dragons and those kind of games. Um, but yeah, it's difficult to say whether I would I would be where I am sort of are now without
Mhm.
those shops to be able to resource this material at such a influential sort of age, really. And I loved it. I loved my comics. I loved my science fiction and fantasy on TV, and I certainly loved my gaming. And then that was the next problem, which was, well, I like all of these, but none of my friends do.
So
Uh,
that was going to be my question, right? So were you the lighthouse, like by yourself, with shedding this light around, or did you have a group of people that
I,
kind of you came across?
yeah, I had some quite close friends, and
Hmm.
I kind of strung on them into playing. and it was quite interesting really, because I think my style of GMing has developed from that early age, because I had to make it entertaining for them, because I knew that if I just started killing them, as you hear these horror stories about GMs back in the day, just going, "Oh, you're all dead, haha." Uh, there's no point. They just go, "Well, that was rubbish. I'm going to go and play football," you know.
Yeah.
I had to make sure they were all having a good time, and had to make sure that they were entertained, and that style of GMing has stayed with me, until now, really.
So your first step into it was GMing. You
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
you
yeah.
didn't get to be a player to
No,
at first.
God,
So
no, no.
right, okay. Like, the way I started was luckily with a group of friends. I was going to say the original. Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
we shared the load. So we had our own world
yeah.
that we played in, but we would rotate around. So everybody would take a shot at being a GM, and that was a great way of doing it because the same reason, right? You wanted to make sure that everybody was having a great time. You
Yeah,
didn't want to kill your friends because
that's
you knew
right.
if they did, the likelihood was they'd kill you back,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah. No, no, absolutely. And that was in the early days. As I got progressively older, um, I was lucky. My girlfriend of that time, her brother was really into it, and this was the time that Gamma World came out. So there was like Dungeons and Dragons, and then there was a number of things that TSR released. There was Boot Hill, which was Wild West, Top Secret, which was espionage, and Gamma World, which is kind of post-apocalyptic mutants. And he volunteered to. "Oh, I really like the look of this. I'm going to run this," and so I did get to play. In those games, and that was a brilliant experience.
do you remember the first character you rolled?
No, I mean,
You don't. Okay.
I rolled so many characters back in the day. It still happens now with Fifth Ed. You hear people that have got so many characters on D&D
Mhm,
Beyond. But rolling characters was all part of the fun of the game back
mhm.
then. And I rolled a ton of characters, especially in Gamma World. There's a lot of randomness to the way you generate your characters. In the old Gamma World, you had random mutations and all sorts of randomness. So no, and it was a very long time ago. Uh,
I was gonna say, well, yeah. So if you started in the original D and that
yeah.
kind of stuff, then you're talking what? You've 6 decades you've been involved in role
Well,
playing now,
I
on and off.
tried early. I've done a little bit of timeliming for you. So
Hmm.
77 was a definitely important year. There was obviously 2000 AD, and obviously Star Wars came out as well. There was
Hmm.
also TV programs like Doctor Who. I think the Tom Baker era started around about that time, and Blake
Hmm.
Seven as well. And I must have been round about 13-ish, sort of then. So again, my formative years for enjoying this kind of sort of subject matter. Um, then it must have been a couple of years later. I don't think it quite hit here in the UK for 77. So it must have been sort of 79, 80, sometime around then, that I sort of discovered sort of the role playing sort of games. And by that time, I was either doing my O levels or just beginning my sort of A levels. So yeah, I mean, if we say 80, how long is that? Is that
Five decades,
yeah, yeah.
right? Yeah. So
Um,
I started in the 80s as well. So we've both done 5 decades. That
yeah,
sounds a lot better, right? We both
yeah,
have
yeah,
been doing
yeah,
this
yeah.
on and off 5 decades, right?
I don't mind. I'm still there in the 70s as a kid enjoying games, to be honest. I find it very difficult to look beyond that. If I'm totally honest, I'm not entirely sure how Heather, my darling wife, puts up with me most of the time. I am a big kid.
So then you did your A levels. Did you go to uni, or did
No,
you
no, no.
start working, or?
Yeah, it was kind of strange, really. As I said, I did chemistry, A level biology, and geography. Um, but I I think the big problem is that I kind of got a very short attention span. I kind of loved the first year of doing my A levels because they were teaching us new stuff. The
Mm.
second year was right. We're going to go over everything again, and I just didn't like it. My attention span had drifted, and of course I was really into my comics and my games, so I had to fund that somehow. And I did it through working. So I had a sort of part-time job with Waitrose, in fact, um, and that was a great company to work with. And I really enjoyed earning money,
Hmm.
and b you know me, I tend to throw myself into things. So I wasn't the kind of Saturday lad that dragged his feet. I was kind of enthusiastic, wanted to do things. And basically, the manager said, "Look, it's none of my business, but we do a sort of A level training scheme for
Hmm.
store managers. If you're interested, apply to that." And that's fundamentally what I did. Um, I just kind of figured I might as well be taught and earn money rather than just go to the university and just be taught, sort of thing.
Hmm.
So I applied to their scheme and they rejected me. um, um, so I also applied to other schemes as well. Obviously, I
Hmm.
wasn't all my eggs in one basket, and I basically got on a retail management scheme with another supermarket that don't exist anymore called International Stores. They've gone through. I mean, this is a long time ago. This is
Hmm.
early 80s, very early 80s, I would say, and uh, that quite didn't work out. I I'm very forthright in my views of what I like and what I don't like, and even at that early age, I was not. Once you started seeing what the management was like, especially in the supermarket retail industry, there was no real um, liking of your staff. Your
Hmm.
staff were human resources. Your staff were there. You taught them one thing, and if they were no good, it's very easy just to get rid of them, replace them with another one. And I didn't have a very good time there. I sort of struggled with it all, and um, in the end, I quit. I just it was got nothing really to do with the retailing. I kind of liked selling stuff, but I just didn't like that large corporate ideology.
Hmm.
And as a young, yeah, I really just was having a hard time with it, struggling. And my parents were super supportive, and they just went, you know what? If it's really making you unhappy, quit, come back, and apply for some other jobs. Um, and I did that. And I suppose what I'm trying to say here is that if it really isn't for you, make the sensible move, because I'm so pleased that I did. Um, it took me probably about 6 months to get another job, but I got a job with 7-Eleven, which there's a point to this conversation, which will come round to gaming again very, very
It will,
rapidly.
yeah.
But 7-Eleven, those of you who are familiar with it, it's a big American company. Sort of, it's like a spa. It's open, technically it started off 7 till 11, but it's a 24-hour convenience store. And a UK company, it brought the franchise, and they were opening some of those in the UK, and it was new and buzzing and quite exciting. And they liked me. They brought me on board, and I started off as a training manager again. I didn't mind taking that step back, and I was very fortunate. It's strange when you meet people that influence your life. I
Yep,
met
I agree.
someone in there who was the regional manager, and he was outstanding in terms of treating everybody not just with respect, but wanting to get the very best out of people.
An
Um,
elevator.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said before, I'm always super keen and eager, and uh, so much so that I said, look, we're opening up all of these stores. I was only a training manager; it was nothing to do with my remit, but I don't mind spending my days off if you will have me. I'll travel around to these stores that you're opening up and just lend a hand, and
Mhm.
it's free work. But I gained a ton of experience with store opening, and I did this for quite a while. I say quite a while; it was a year, 2 years, something like that, really. Um, and I was in a hotel in Staines of all places, and I don't know whether it was that reason or anything else, because I was enjoying my job. I was learning stuff, and by that point I'd been sort of promoted, given a pay rise, because
Yep.
everybody was going, "Oh, he's doing all of this stuff, and he's
Mhm.
it's good." And I was gaining a ton of experience at a young age, and I was flicking through White Dwarf, my gaming magazine, not of choice, the only gaming magazine that was
Yep.
available in that time. No internet, nothing else. And I saw an advertisement for Virgin Games. Virgin Games were opening up some game stores, and I kind of wrote a kind of little sarky letter to them. Not as a nasty one, but oh, here I am. I like games. I've done all this stuff, and I didn't really think anything else of it, because um, I didn't really want to get the job, because I was doing quite well with this other company, and it was
Yep.
for another trainee manager position. So it was like, would have been a step back down again. And I sent it off and I carried on working. And then about a few months later, I got an interview, and it was like, oh, what's this about? So I went down there, and we had conversations, and it was just at the time that Virgin were doing the mega stores, and they
Yeah.
hadn't really done anything. They got 100 Oxford Street, which was the gaming store in London, and they got the mega store on the corner of Tottenham Court Road,
Mhm.
but nothing else really. And it just looked like a huge opportunity to work in gaming retail.
Yeah.
And bearing in mind, this was the time of the Commodore 64. So
A great computer.
yeah, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about pre-consoles. Consoles were 10
Yeah.
years later.
Mhm.
This was the time of Spectrum and putting your tapes in, and it wasn't just computer games though, because that was a fledgling thing. It was
Yeah.
it was all about your role-playing games and your board games and things like that. So I was very lucky to be accepted, and I worked there and worked my way up. Obviously, my experience of store opening from 7-Eleven really came into the fold there. Um,
And that was the Birmingham megastore then,
I
or
opened
was
the
it?
Birmingham Megastore, and I worked in the Birmingham Megastore. But I travelled around. We did
Sure.
Nottingham one. People can remember. I think it was Friar Lane that it was on.
Yeah, yeah, it was, and it was a
Yeah,
great loss when that went.
yeah,
It's sort of places that you
uh,
remember where you hung out as a kid.
yeah,
Virgin Megastore, Games Workshop,
yeah,
Another World.
yeah.
Right.
I was instrumental in opening that up. I was very lucky to be flown out to Dublin. We did that one. We did it all around the country, basically.
Mhm.
It was a time of massive expansion. Um, so I mean that was just fantastic. Um, they were putting me up in hotels, and
Mhm.
I was dealing with products that I really liked, and sort of training staff in the way that I kind of like to train staff, inspired from this sort of regional manager from 7-Eleven. So it was a great time. And during this time, I was obviously playing games and running games as well when I had the
Yeah.
chance. Um,
When did you meet Heather?
uh, um, Sort of 99, I think. So it was a long time after all of this. Yeah.
Had you moved to Nottingham at the time, or
Oh, this
was that
was this
right?
was pre. This was many years before I met
Uh-huh.
met Heather.
Uh-huh.
Um, Although it's very strange, because Heather has worked in the gaming industry as well.
Okay.
She was instrumental in working with the guys that developed Flintlock, which is a miniatures game. Um, so she knows an awful lot of people that I kind of knew, but we didn't know each other, and
Sure.
we've sort of circled round for a very long time before we actually sort of met each other. She even, I discovered, gate crashed one of my events without paying. Yes, I still need to get that entry fee for her. After doing this, I left Virgin. I worked for some other companies, and then finally I kind of left that and set myself up as Chimera Leisure. This was
Mhm.
pre the store, and we I wanted to do live role playing. I wanted to run
Sure.
some live role playing, so I started running some live role playing games. And at the very last UK sort of Gen Con, we ran something called Flesh and Metal, which was basically we had the auditorium with the sound deck and stuff like that, and we turned
Hmm.
it into a nightclub, a sort of cyberpunk
Wow.
nightclub. And there was a little bit of interactive plot going on around,
Hmm.
but fundamentally we had a DJ that was playing cyberpunk sound sort of records
Sure.
and whatever. So it was a nightclub immersive experience before they kind of were a thing. So that was really good fun as well.
I
Um,
think there was probably times we probably crossed as well because
yeah.
I was doing live role playing early '90s
Hmm.
with the guys up in Nottingham, but
Yeah.
we spoke about the gathering before about
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
that used to go on, but we used to travel down fairly regularly to kind of down Birmingham way, Coventry way around there, and there was a group down there that we used to go and Monster for,
Yeah.
and they would come up and Monster for us at times, and so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So I mean,
So how did you get to Nottingham then?
um, I've always been sort of transient.
Mhm.
Eventually, I decided to settle down, not in Nottingham, but Ripley,
Yep.
because it was close to the M1 basically, and I had
Mhm.
friends
Yep.
in Ripley itself, Ripley in Derbyshire. When we were running this, it was Chimera Leisure at the time, um, and it was sort of towards the end of me running the live role playing and towards the start of, well, no, towards us. We'd already opened the shop up, but running the shop was taking more time, so we stopped doing the role playing to concentrate upon
Mhm.
the retail. Um, the Basically sort of met Heather, and then we decided to relocate to sort of Nottingham when we sort of opened up the Beeston store, really. So um,
And obviously you were playing and running, well, probably running more than playing yourself. I don't know
yeah,
how much of a player you've been really through your life as a. In this, it sounds like it's been heavily skewed towards the DMing side of things. It's not
yeah, yeah,
unusual for some people, right?
yeah,
Um, and then then you got the store and you started DMing in the store, right?
yeah, yeah.
As well.
We ran basically organized play, and one of those aspects of it is to run role play games. So yeah,
Hmm.
and that's where I met quite a lot of people that are in chat at the moment.
Yeah, I remember I kind of flirted with coming back into the hobby back in '99.
Hmm.
1999, back in 2019, before it all kind of changed, right? And you still had the store then, I think, and I remember
Yeah,
reaching out to see it to find out if there was any groups going on, and ended up joining another group for a couple of sessions before my work kind of ramped up again.
yeah,
But yeah, even for somebody who wasn't immersed in the scene as I am now,
hmm,
Chimera was well known
yeah.
around everywhere and carries that kind of pedigree with it still, right? So,
Yeah. Uh, Stuart has said, "Is your live game on the 28th your first time being a player?" No, as I said, I have played. There was a time um, where I had a very good set of friends. This was up in Leeds, the early days of Travelling Man, which is another very influential store. They've got stores all up and down. They're involved in Thought Bubble, and I knew the owner fairly well at the time, Nabil, um, and Yeah, there was quite a large group of us that did spend a lot of time. It was almost like a student house where people did take on the role of being a gem or a storyteller. It was during those very sort of heady days of lots of different systems coming out.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was
Fate.
yeah, yeah, it was
Yeah.
great. Kind of, sort of Vampire and Shadowrun and so many. Just to
Mhm.
sort of, and we were all into role playing, and we all sort of role played. So I've been a player um, a fair amount, and I just love gaming, so I don't really have a preference. Obviously, it's my job, so I have to I have to run games to pay the bills. Um, I mean, I suppose that would be the dream, really, is being a player, and that pays your bills. Substantially less prep. Um,
Do that with it now, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did you ever think that would be a career for people to be a player? I mean, the way the world's changed in that respect, you see these, they're not really
Yeah,
players, they're actors, right? That's the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
reality of the
yeah, yeah.
situation. But
The market has completely changed. I mean, back in
uh,
the day when I was running live role play, we were charging for it,
yep.
um, and you could never then believe people would pay for a service around a table instead. You were providing costumes, you were providing
Yep.
a sort of venue, sometimes food and drink. You were supporting the crew that sort of came and everything else. Um, so
In
yeah,
weekend events.
yeah, yeah, full
Yeah.
weekend events. It's but it has changed, and I do equate it as just like a service industry, really. It initially seems a little bit strange, but it's no stranger than going to a restaurant and having someone else cook for you. Um, it's a service industry.
I've thought about this a lot recently, and really, it's just another branch of improv,
Yeah,
right? And people go and watch improv, and some people want to be involved in improv, right? And
yeah,
that's just how this is moved. Is that now you've got somebody directing that improv a bit more,
yeah,
and there's rules behind it, and you know, I think that's why a lot of people enjoy it because they do see it as that opportunity. I mean, it's very good for your mental health. I get a great deal of it's a great outlet for me
yeah, yeah,
in that
absolutely.
respect, right? I think it's for a lot of people. So, but yeah, so then you lost the store. Yeah, you had to step away
Well,
from it.
it wasn't
Yeah.
so much we lost the store; it was the rent came up for renewal, and they
Hmm.
wanted us to sign for another 5 years, and it was kind of going up as well. And this was just pre-Brexit, and whatever your politics are, the supply to the games industry was very bad anyway. Um, there are certain top items that you can always sell more than you can purchase, and it's that you kind of need to have to turn over the money. And with Brexit coming, we knew that it would be difficult to maintain that. Little did we know that 6 months after closing this, we closed it in October, then March, COVID hit as well. Um, um, and it's a bittersweet decision. I loved the community of the store, but the reality is we was making no money. I was working even longer hours than I'm working now. I
Hmm.
was working 7 days a week, uh, getting up and getting to the store for 10 o'clock, closing the store at 10 o'clock and leaving. I was earning substantially less than minimum wage. All of the money that was coming in just was going out to pay out for other things. Um, there are some people that have made some great successes, um,
Hmm.
but after a good 10 or so years of doing it, together with the advent of what Brexit was looking like, we just decided no, it's probably best not to renew it,
Hmm.
because the idea of having a business is to build something, for it to make an income for you, but then you can sell it on to someone who wants to carry on that legacy.
Yep.
Um, and to be honest, I wouldn't sit right. Somebody could certainly wanted to have purchased Chimera as a brand, as a community and everything, but I wouldn't feel right in going, give me some money for this, but you are going to have to work 7 days a week and not
Hmm.
earn any kind of money. And I couldn't see that it was going to grow in that sort of Brexit environment. And this wasn't just me. This was conversations, obviously, we had with Heather. Sort of running up to us closing the store down, I started running more and more sort of games anyway, and it was always the intention to run face-to-face games and to
Yeah.
continue doing that. And we started doing that in between the closure of the store and the um, the lockdown, basically.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I miss the community, but the reality is a lot of the community has moved to Discord. So
Yep.
so that's it. It's also like incredibly difficult to sort of compete with people like Amazon.
Yep.
You know, they are literally selling D&D books a couple of pounds above cost. It's not realistic to do that. For anybody who understands retail, it sounds like, well, you're making a couple of pounds. It's like, well, no, because that
You
couple of
know,
pounds is going to have to go on rent, on staff, on
yeah.
all the bills and everything else before we even see any kind of money to come to us. And we had some brilliant supporters to the store who went, you know what, we'll pay full price. We'll pay full
Hmm.
price for that book. I know I can get it cheaper, but it's like it's your money, and whilst I really appreciate you supporting us in that way, I don't feel it's fair to do that, you know. Um, so it was becoming a strange, untenable sort of situation, really. Um,
But now, like you said before, the the reach you have now because of pivoting to online play
yeah,
is far bigger than it was in the
yeah,
store
yeah,
because
yeah.
you're now
Yeah,
touching people worldwide, right? There's people playing in all different areas, and
yeah,
people
yeah,
who've moved away, you've got the opportunity to play now.
yeah, yeah.
So that's a great thing. That's a legacy in
Yeah,
itself, isn't
yeah,
it?
no,
Being able to,
something has most definitely come out of it. And I don't regret that in any way, shape, or form. The time that we've put into it, I genuinely love my time there.
Mhm.
Um, like I say, I'm tend to be sort of crazy passionate and don't think about the actual practicalities of, oh yeah, we better pay a bill. Um, but it just wasn't viable to sort of continue it. You know, like I said, referring right back to the very start when I kind of left my very first job, sometimes it's not a case of being a quitter or a loser. It's a case of knowing that this is the sensible decision to sort of take, you know. And sometimes that's a very hard thing to sort of admit to yourself. And even now I feel a little guilty, you know, because we had such a good community there. But it just wasn't sort of feasible, and we've done as much as we can to give that community a new place to hang out in the virtual space of sort of Discord, really.
and now YouTube,
Yeah,
right?
now YouTube,
Yeah.
which is what we mentioned about it being called Club. Um, so things are sort of continuing, really. I mean, the company is still technically Chimera Leisure,
Hmm.
but we kind of wanted to sort of rebrand it somewhat. So this is why we came up with the name sort of Twisted Narrative, but everything still goes through that legacy of Chimera that's seen a number of iterations. It was a
Oh,
live role playing company, it was a retail company, and now it's sort of online tabletop
polymorphed.
RPG. Yeah, polymorphed indeed. Indeed. Um, so yeah, and that's kind of brought me to where I am at the moment. And whilst it's still sometimes difficult to pay the bills, there's no terrible outgoings or surprise bills
Mhm.
coming in. I'm definitely working less hours than I was. I'm enjoying every moment of it, so it was most definitely the right move, and I'm very happy with it. And we've got a wonderful community of
We definitely have.
yeah, absolutely 100%. So that kind of brings you up to date with where I started, going through some of my quite boring tale of my life, but to where we are now. But always played games, always enjoyed games, and I've seen some interesting developments with obviously my time at Virgin Games
Hmm.
and rubbing shoulders with Games Workshop as it made that transition from um, to Citadel Miniatures, to a miniature company, to what it is today. Um, Through all of TSR, through Wizards of the Coast taking it over,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's been interesting, and who knows what is going to happen over the next 50 years. I think
Well,
something quite exciting, really. I really do. I think
I think I'm in agreement with you. I think we're about to see something happen in role playing we saw in other industries a few years ago,
mhm,
right? And that is the grassroots rising up, right? If you think about what's happened in music, if you think about what's happened with creators online when it
yeah,
comes to YouTube channels and the stuff, there's now this massive opportunity through the likes of Patreon or Kickstarter or any, to
absolutely.
really push things out there. And I think we're coming to a renaissance.
Yeah,
I really do.
no, I genuinely think it's creator control. We've seen it, like you say, in music. We've seen it in comics, and it's when people who have got a vision get the idea to get that vision out there without it being stymied by um, people that want to make money from that don't actually know what they're talking about in the first place.
Yep.
So it's an exciting time, absolutely, and I hope I see the next 50 years of it, but we will see. I'll still be running, whether I'm in an old person's home or not. I will be there doing it. We are reaching that time where I need to
Yep.
go and actually run a game. So um, I would say any final questions, but if you do, save them and maybe we'll do this again another time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time to have a chat about yourself.
it's I genuinely hope I haven't bored you to tears,
Not at
you
all.
and chat and everybody else on catch up. So for now, because I really do need to dash and go and do some collateral damage, a big thank you to Ian for the questions and getting that information out of me. Big thanks to everybody in chat, and thanks for watching on catch up as well. If you've liked what you see, like it, and don't forget to give us a subscription if we want to grow this channel. Um, we
Down
need
there
those,
somewhere, I
yeah,
think.
we need those likes and we need those subscribes to grow this. But thank you very much. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Elsa. Um, we will catch you all, if not in a game over the weekend. 6 o'clock on Monday night is when we return. For now, bye from me.
Bye from me.